most of you have heard of the hero's journey, right? Everybody talks about it, from CEOs to Disney princesses to your counselor. And the idea is something like, you leave the known area, you go out into the unknown, you have a road of trials, you slay a dragon, you get the treasure, the boon, and you return back to your community, right? And this is funny because I was really thinking about this lately, and it doesn't resonate with me. Because I have never slayed a dragon, even metaphorically. I have been slayed by dragons many times. My soul, my heart, recently even my body. And I think it's when you are there in a million pieces, like I was talking about in high school, like he was expressing in his sorrow over his friend, like talking about her abusive relationship. I mean, everyone knows in this room what it feels like to sit in a puddle of your own broken pieces. And it's about how we navigate, how we use our own wisdom and imagination to put those pieces back together, right? That is actually the hero or heroine's journey. So this story, I believe, speaks to that. And it's called The Crescent Moon Bear. It is a Japanese folktale. And there is actually one little interactive part that I have to teach you first. So I'm going to say something like, because she was, and when I put my hands like this, you all say, a woman who loved. And you have to put your hand on your heart. So we'll practice this. Because she was
a woman who loves.
And that's the refrain. We'll feel like we're in church a little bit. So it goes like this. Once there was a woman who lived in the mountains, in a fragrant forest. And her husband had been away at war for a very long time. And when he finally returned to her, he came home greatly changed. He refused to come in the house, instead sleeping out on the stones in the forest. And when she would come and present these loving bowlfuls of soup and of bean curd and rice and seaweed and quail eggs, he would kick them aside and he would say, "Leave me alone." Desperate. And because she was
a woman who loves,
she found herself at the house of the ancient healer. And she said, "Please, please, grandmother, can you help me? Can you make me a potion? My husband has been so wounded by this war. And if you have a potion that can return him to his gentle, loving self, I would be so grateful." And the old healer looked at her and she kind of scratched her hairy chin. She looked her up and down and left and right, and she said, "This I can do for you, but I am missing one very important ingredient. It is the hair from the crescent moon of the bear that lives on the top of that mountain. Get me that hair and I will make your potion." Well, because she was
a woman who loves,
she gathered all her things that night and she prepared herself and off she went, dauntless in the morning, never ever having been outside the stone walls of her own village. And the first thing she came to was a huge field of boulders, so big they were like loaves of bread. And she called out to them, "Arigato zaiko! Arigato zaisho!" Which means, "Thank you. Thank you for letting me walk on your backs." And she began crawling on her hands and knees, scaling these rocks, bloodying her fingers and her knees, ripping her kimono. But still she went on because she was
a woman who loves.
The next thing she came to was a forest, thick with brambles, with leaves shaped like stars. And she tried to get herself through, but every scratch of her snowy skin hurt, but on she went. And when she finished, she got through. She said, "Arigato zaisho. Thank you for letting me pass." Well, as dusk fell that night, the sky was filled with dark, scary birds kind of coming all around her. And right away, she knew they were the spirits, the restless spirits of people who had died who had no relatives. And though they were menacing her, she called out to them and she said, "I will be your relative. I will give you rest." And she took time out of her journey to make sure all those spirits were put to rest. And when she was finished, she went on her way the next day. And she came to this enormous snowfield. And it was the sort of snowfield that she went through and she fell through on every third step. Very, very difficult. And then a big wind pulled up and it blew all this snow in her face and she was nearly snowblind. But on she went because she was
a woman who loves.
And she went up and up and up the mountain, turning and shouting, "Arigato zaisho. Thank you for letting me walk on your body." And when she arrived at night at the top of that mountain and found the safety of the cave, she ate a little bit of food and fell fast asleep. And the next morning she could see very clearly the paw prints of that crescent moon bear, the pads right in the snow. And she followed it back and found out where the cave was. So that night she went and she put a bowl of her best food right at the cave, and she retreated all the way back to her own cave and she waited. And she saw that enormous bear come out, sniff the air, knowing someone had been there, looking down, seeing the food, and then gobbling it all up at once. Well, the second night she did the same, but she retreated about 3/4 of the way and watched him do the same thing, and then halfway and a quarter way, until on the 5th day, she stood right outside the cave and put the bowl of food down. And when that crescent moon bear came out, it started snorting and roaring, and it stood up on its back feet and opened its mouth, so much so that spittle was flying on her, and she could see the red brown of the roof of his mouth and the razor of his teeth. And because she was
a woman who loved,
she stood her ground. And that bear, sensing her confidence and feeling that love, put his front paws down, still snorting, still wildness in his eyes. And she looked right in his eyes. And when she looked, she saw the mountains that he had seen. She saw the rivers and the valleys and the trees and the conflicts. But she sat there for long enough to look deep enough that she actually saw the pain and the loneliness of the crescent moon bear. And having felt this from her, he relaxed, feeling seen, feeling understood. And at that moment, she said, "Please, dear bear, I have fed you for all these nights. I just need one small thing from you. Would you please, please give me a hair from the crescent moon under your throat?" And he snorted and he stomped, and she stood her ground because she was a
woman who loved.
And he slowly raised his massive snout. And she reached in and she plucked a hair, and he screamed out as if he was wounded. Rah! And she backed up, bowing the whole way. "Arigato zaisho! Arigato zaisho!" holding the hair. And she ran as fast as her legs would take her. And she went down the snowfield, past the birds that were now at rest, past the forest with the leaves shaped like stars, past the boulders that looked like big loaves of bread, down the stone steps back to her village. And even though she was raggy and filthy and her hair a matted mess and she was bleeding from all over her body and she was exhausted, she ended up at the home of the old healer with And the healer was sitting there quietly in front of her fire. And she said, come in and sit down. And she said, here, grandmother, I have what you asked for. I've brought the hair of the crescent moon bear. And the old woman took it from her hand and she held it up to the light. She turned it this way and that way and up and down. And she said, yes, it is indeed. And then she threw it in the fire. It started crackling and popping and disintegrated all at once. And the young woman said, wait, what are you doing? I just went all the way up the mountain to get I just got that hair. And she said, be calm, be calm. Do you remember every step you took up that mountain? Do you remember going on because you loved? Do you remember putting all those restless spirits to peace? Do you remember facing your fears? Do you remember earning the trust of the crescent moon bear? And she said, well, yes, grandmother, I remember all of it. Good, she said. Go home and use those learnings with your husband. And that she was able to do because she was a woman who loved. So this story is a little different than a hero's journey because she does leave her known area. She does survive trials, but her salvation comes from her compassion, her patience, her nurturance. She's feeding others, and most of all, her love. And it's interesting too because there isn't just her getting something and it being finished. It's a process, and it's a process that one does over and over and over. But each time you do it, each time you're in that hole and you have to crawl yourself out of it, you get better at it. Much, much better. And I honor all of you, and I thank you for a wonderful semester. Arigato.